I'm divorcing you and will move abroad with this person. A few months after the birth of our little daughter. While holding his mistress, my husband declared the divorce with an arrogant demeanor. A transfer with his mistress? Does he even understand what he is saying? I'll give you the house and we'll divide the assets. In return, you take care of the children and our parents. They are also your parents too since we were married. It's only natural for you to take care of them. While I was silently listening, my presumptuous husband dictated terms. As if he was doing me a favor. He wanted a divorce and still expected me to care for his parents who lived with us. Which infuriated me. What I couldn't forgive the most was his disregard for our child. If he insists, I have my own thoughts. I agree to the divorce. However, I refuse both your proposals. What? How are you going to live without the house or the assets? Are you stupid? My husband mocked me. But he doesn't know. I have an ace up my sleeve. Soon, he will realize who the real fool is. I am Rebecca. I work from home, living with my husband Dylan and our newborn daughter Sarah. Dylan used to be a reliable person. Before marriage, we traveled a lot. And we shared household chores after getting married and moving in together, making every day enjoyable. During my pregnancy, he cared for me, massaging my back when the morning sickness was severe, and going shopping at night if I craved something. He was overjoyed when our daughter was born, and even brought a huge amount of diapers to the hospital in his excitement. He was truly a gentle husband, and I was looking forward to our life as a family of 3. However, the bright future I envisioned quickly collapsed. I fell ill after giving birth, and my hospital stay was unexpectedly extended. It happened just when I got permission to leave the hospital, and was excited to return home with my daughter. Congratulations on your discharge and the birth, Rebecca. We'll be relying on you from now on. Sorry for the sudden news. Surprisingly, Dylan's parents were at our house. I initially thought they had come to celebrate the birth. However, they were not just visiting, but they had moved in and would live with us. Living together? Why all of a sudden? I had never heard such a thing. While they started to play with my daughter, I hurriedly pulled my husband to a corner of the room and questioned him in a low voice. What do you mean by living together? It's troubling to decide this without discussing it. Sarah was just born. While the relationship with my in-laws was generally okay, we hadn't really spoken since the wedding. With the onset of parenting just beginning, I couldn't afford to be considerate of my in-laws. Yet, Dylan pleaded with me. I'm sorry for the suddenness, but I haven't been able to do much for my parents, and they're financially struggling. It could reduce our burden of childcare since mom and dad can also help, right? It's not all bad. It turned out that his father had gambled away his retirement funds, and his mother, having been a homemaker, was out of money and struggling. Dylan had moved out for high school and hadn't visited them much. And now, as an adult, he wanted to help his struggling parents. Taking advantage of my extended hospital stay, he had forced the move. And they had already sold their house. While I wasn't happy with the unilateral decision to live together, his points made some sense. Since it was our first time parenting, the support would be welcome. After all, it was my kind husband's request. I nodded in agreement, and Dylan joyously thanked me repeatedly. Since they were my husband's kind parents, I was sure we would get along soon. They would be a strong support. Despite feeling some discomfort with my husband, I focused only on the benefits of living with my in-laws. Surely, they would be helpful with housework and childcare, among many other things. However, thinking that was a big mistake. Dylan, are you doing the housework? Leave that to your wife. You don't need to do it. Now that we live together, laundry is the wife's job. So you don't have to worry about it. By the way, Rebecca, could you buy this for me next time? I want to try out this new nail polish. At first, my in-laws were humble, but gradually they became arrogant after moving in. When my husband tried to do the housework, they stopped him, saying it was the wife's job. While they did nothing and lazed around all day. They didn't help with childcare either, treating me like a maid. Mother, didn't you just buy expensive nail polish recently? If you buy them so often, it will impact our living expenses. Are you talking back to me? Just shut up and buy it quickly. It's really unpleasant. You're such an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. My mother-in-law, always wanting new things, pushed the shopping onto me. And my father-in-law frequently begged for pocket money to go gambling. Despite having no money. The two of them didn't work and depended on my husband's income, splurging it away. When I pointed it out, they clearly showed their displeasure. Dylan also grew tired of his spendthrift parents. And eventually started giving them money as they demanded. Influenced by his parents' attitude, my once kind husband had changed. Rebecca, this place is a mess. The laundry isn't even folded. What have you been doing all day? At least do the cleaning properly. I don't want to come home to such a dirty house. He complained haughtily, and his late returns from overtime work and drinking parties increased. Now, he hardly did any housework or childcare. When was the last time he even held our daughter? The kind husband I knew was nowhere to be found. The only time I could carve out was spent on crafts I had done since before. As I struggled with solo parenting, housework, and caring for my in-laws. Chronically sleep-deprived and desperately managing day after day. My thoughts felt foggy every day, unable to think clearly. I focused solely on getting through each day without harboring any resentment. Then one day, after finally putting my daughter to sleep and returning to the living room, I heard the sound of a message notification. Looking at the table, I noticed Dylan's smartphone was lit up. It seemed he had left it on and gone to take a bath. Though I had no intention of looking, the ringtone sounded again, and I curiously took a peek. Only to be shocked by what I saw. Thanks for today too, Dylan. I wish you could get divorced soon so we could be together every day. Shall we go on a trip next time? The messages were from a woman. It was clear from her urging for a divorce that their relationship was not innocent. Could it be an affair? I thought about checking more messages, but then I heard him coming out of the bath. However, I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep without checking. I decided to wait until he was sound asleep. Once I confirmed he was asleep, I tried to sneak a look at his smartphone, but it was locked. He usually used fingerprint recognition to unlock it. Using his finger, I tried the fingerprint recognition, and it unlocked successfully. Careful not to wake him, I immediately opened the messaging app. I hoped it was all a misunderstanding. However, my hopes were dashed as I only found flirty messages between them. Can't wait to divorce Rebecca and be with you. I want to be with you forever. It's hard to meet without the company finding out about us. Just a few of the incriminating messages made me feel sick. It appeared Dylan was having an affair with his mistress, who was called Alyssa, within the company. Looking back to the beginning of history, they had started their exchange shortly after my in-laws moved into our house. The most recent dates suggested they had stayed at a hotel on days. Dylan had claimed to be working late. The thought of my husband cheating was unbelievable. And my hands trembled as I gripped his phone. I had never imagined that he was enjoying his time with a woman. From his company while dumping all the housework, childcare, and care of his parents on me. The shock of betrayal blurred my vision. Yet, as I scrolled back through the messages, my eyes caught another message from his mistress. By the way, aren't you getting a transfer abroad soon? I'd love to go too. Maybe I should just go. A transfer abroad? Dylan? I had heard nothing about that. From their conversations, it seemed his transfer abroad was true, which will be due soon. Despite having a newborn daughter, he hadn't shared with me any information about the in-laws' move or the transfer abroad. We were supposed to be a family. The fact that I had to learn about the transfer from his mistress's messages made my blood boil. Then, the word divorce appeared frequently in the messages. Dylan's repeated statements about wanting to divorce me quickly cooled my feelings toward him. Unforgivable. If he was so eager to divorce, I would grant his wish. Learning his true feelings, I began to consider divorce myself. The thought of no longer having to endure the selfishness of Dylan and my in-laws was refreshing. A traitor who did neither housework nor cared for our daughter was unnecessary to me. My feelings for Dylan were completely gone, and I went to the law office to get divorce papers. A month later, Rebecca, and Mom and Dad, I have something important to talk about. Dylan, who had returned from an outing on a weekend, called me and his parents into the living room with a serious expression. Come in. When he said that, a woman entered the living room. Hello, I'm Alyssa. I'm in a relationship with Dylan. The woman was the mistress Dylan had been communicating with. As she surveyed the gathered faces, she smiled. I was stunned that he would bring his mistress to our home. I couldn't understand why he would bring her home. Was he out of his mind? Even as my in-laws stood aghast, Dylan put his arm around his mistress's shoulder. I've got a transfer abroad lined up. I'm planning to go there with Alyssa. I intend to divorce Rebecca. Well, I don't need Sarah, so Rebecca can take her. Although I was not surprised by the transfer or the divorce since I already knew about them. His last dismissive comment about our daughter widened my eyes. It was unthinkable for a father to make such a declaration so boldly. That was beyond the lowest. I glared fiercely at him. You seriously mean Sarah is not needed? I'm serious. I'm planning to marry Alyssa, so I don't need Sarah. Plus, while I'm abroad, you should take care of Mom and Dad. Even though we're divorcing, they're still your family, so it's only natural for you to look after them. The appalling comments about our lovely child boiled my blood. And the additional demand to take care of his parents made me dizzy. Even in divorce, I couldn't bear the thought of caring for his leeching parents. I'm not Dylan's maid. I couldn't imagine how he could think of such things. But I wasn't the only one upset by this talk. Wait a minute, a transfer abroad? Divorce? I haven't heard anything about that. What about our life? Shut up, that's why I'm leaving it to Rebecca until the divorce. Can't you start taking care of yourselves for once? What an awful thing to say. Are you planning to abandon us after marrying that woman? You're a disgrace to parents. As my husband grimaced impatiently, my mother-in-law raised her voice. And my father-in-law glared at him. They had relied on their son, but having him not around was unexpected. Realizing there was no future staying with a nearly divorced daughter-in-law, they seemed to grasp the situation. They were trying somehow to follow him. However, I was appalled by my in-laws who didn't scold him for his affair. And only thought about themselves. It's no surprise, given how they had exploited me. Stop fighting, please. We haven't finished our discussion. As my husband and his parents started arguing, I stepped between them to stop the fight for the moment. When their voices quieted, I faced my husband. We were talking about divorce, right? Fine, let's divorce. Agreeing to the divorce, Dylan and Alyssa clasped hands joyfully. We can now get married, they exclaimed. Whether he felt pity for me for accepting the divorce so smoothly, or he just got carried away. Dylan, holding her hand while smugly smiling, said to me, You'll also take care of my parents, so in return, I'll give this house to you, Rebecca. I'll even split the assets because I feel sorry for you. Be grateful. I frowned at his haughty attitude. He probably thought he was being merciful. However, my decision was already made. I agree to the divorce. However, I refuse both your proposals. What? How are you going to live without the house or the assets? Are you stupid, Rebecca? Are you dumb? Dylan is being kind to you. It's a pity that you've been living with such a person. I'm really glad you chose me. They laughed derisively. Giving me this house? Who's the real fool here? It's about time I set the record straight. It seems you've forgotten, but this house was inherited from my grandfather. The deed is still in my name, so you have no authority to decide what to do with this house. There was a momentary pause in my husband's movements. Perhaps having completely forgotten that the house was in my name. I inherited it before we got married. Before we moved in, Dylan himself had said, "Since it's your inherited house, let's take good care of it." It seems he had forgotten that too. Moreover, if I divided the property with you, Dylan, I would be at a loss. So I have no intention of doing so. You at a loss? Even though you earn less than me? He looked down on me as if I were saying something absurd. This man, despite living with me, knew nothing about me. It was astonishing how little he understood about how his spouse earned her income. I've been running an online shop selling handmade accessories with a friend since I retired after getting pregnant. The shop is doing well now, and I'm actually earning quite a bit more than before. In fact, I had been selling handicrafts online with a friend since my pregnancy. I had always been into crafts as a hobby and thought I was quite skilled. Amidst this, a crafting friend suggested we start an online shop while I had time on my hands. Before retiring, I worked in marketing. So I contributed ideas and sold the items as unique, one-of-a-kind products. We accepted custom orders and focused on creating pieces that satisfied our customers. The sales were modest at first, but gradually they improved and became quite substantial. My earnings had long surpassed my husband's income. He was shocked to learn just how much I was making. When asked why I hadn't told him, I simply responded that he had never asked. It was his fault for not taking the time to connect with me as a couple. Lately, I've been paying most of the living expenses. Your parents have been spending your money like water, Dylan. How could we possibly live on your earnings alone? Have you checked your account? Do you realize how much our savings have decreased since we got married? Dylan's face went pale, and he broke out in a cold sweat. He had been so preoccupied with his mistress that he hadn't noticed our dwindling savings. Originally, we lived on his income. However, since his parents moved in, their gambling and shopping had increased our expenses. So I had to use my earnings. Dividing assets under these circumstances would be a loss for me. So, no need for property division, right? Surely, Dylan, you're not expecting to rely on my money after initiating the divorce? When I spoke firmly, he was slightly flustered but nodded vigorously, seemingly trying to stay cool in front of his mistress. Okay, no need for property division. The moment I got his agreement, I took out the already completed divorce papers from the cabinet and placed them in front of him. Then, sign this now. Divorce papers? Why? Dylan was surprised not only that there were divorce papers, but also that they were already filled out. I handed him a pen without allowing him to question further. Good thing I had them handy. It's great that the divorce will be finalized before you go on your overseas assignment. This way, your parents and I will have absolutely nothing to do with each other. As soon as I hinted that I had no intention of taking care of his parents, Dylan and his parents were visibly shaken. It's only natural. Once he signed the divorce papers, I would become a stranger to them. Now that he knew the house was in my name, they would also lose their place to live. Before his parents could make a scene, I urged him to sign, and he finally did. After carefully taking it, I smiled brightly at my in-laws and Dylan, who stood frozen and stiff. Well, since this is now my house, I'd like those who are unrelated to please leave. If you don't leave quickly, I'll inform your company about the affair. Just as I told them that, fearing the news reaching his company, Dylan hurriedly took his parents and his mistress and left the house. Only my precious daughter remained at home. Finally, the house became quiet, and I took a deep breath of relief. 6 months had passed since the divorce was finalized when I received a call from Dylan, who sounded extremely exhausted. It seems he was facing a difficult situation at work. Afterward, my in-laws moved into a cramped, run-down apartment, and Dylan started living at his mistress's place. Perhaps Dylan felt relieved to be away from the troublesome in-laws and ready for a fresh start with his mistress. However, fearing being abandoned by Dylan as he moved abroad, my in-laws called his company multiple times until the upper management agreed to cancel his overseas transfer. During those calls, they explained in detail about the divorce and his affair, saying he divorced his wife and got together with his mistress. And, if he goes abroad with his mistress, we will run out of money and won't be able to live. Because of this, rumors of the affair spread throughout his company, and he was seen as a troublemaker, which led to the cancellation of his overseas transfer. Furthermore, intimate exchanges through company email about dining and hotel arrangements with his mistress were uncovered during an internal investigation. Dylan ended up not just losing his overseas transfer but being demoted to a remote location. His company was abuzz with the affair story, and he found it difficult to work as he was looked at unfavorably. I want to quit my job. Rebecca, can't you support me? I realize now that I need you. On the phone, my exhausted ex-husband pleaded with me. It was surprising to hear such words from a man who initiated a divorce and moved in with his mistress. Even if Dylan felt he needed me, I did not need him. I refuse. Instead, you'll be paying me child support. Keep that in mind. As soon as I firmly brought up child support, perhaps missing his daughter, I could hear Dylan crying over the phone. I want to see Sarah. I want to spend time with my lovely Sarah. His late regrets repulsed me. To think he could utter such things after all he had said about not needing her. It was you who said you didn't need your daughter, right? Don't forget the words you said to your precious daughter. If you miss her, make sure you pay child support. If he truly cared for his daughter, he should start by fulfilling his responsibilities. Dylan nodded through his tears and agreed to pay the child support. Due to the affair rumors spreading in her company, the mistress was bullied by senior colleagues and eventually resigned due to stress. It's unfortunate she fell ill, but had she not engaged in the affair, she wouldn't have faced such a future. She was being punished for her lack of self-discipline. As his mistress and Dylan's relationship deteriorated, they eventually broke up. Dylan moved out of her house and temporarily lived with his parents in their shabby apartment. But fearing being abandoned again if Dylan was demoted, his parents took his money and disappeared. Dylan contacted me to ask if I knew where they had gone, but of course, I had no idea. From his urgency, it seemed they had taken a significant amount of money. Eventually, Dylan planned to report to the police, saying bitterly, "I won't forgive anyone who takes the money I earned." If his parents were found, a nasty family dispute seemed inevitable. Meanwhile, I continued to work and manage a successful online shop with a friend while raising my daughter. Life remained busy, but without the burden of caring for my Dylan and his parents. I felt much freer and more comfortable. My daughter was growing well each day, and she was incredibly adorable. For her sake and mine, I'm focusing on moving forward and doing my best.